Well, it's fun to imagine what could happen if he gets some polish to his game, but when we need to polish his footwork, pocket management skills, accuracy, ball security, and processing, we're talking about a big project for a team to take on, and it's just hard to expect a team to be patient enough to see the fruition, or just honestly be hard to expect a coaching staff to be in long enough to be able to see the results. There are definitely deficits in his game as I previously discussed, but the mold is there for a great quarterback. Hey y'all! For this week's video, we'll finally be doing an in-depth analysis of Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe. Sorry for pushing this off, but I was a bit indecisive with the order I wanted to get these out, but I'm finally ready to discuss Milroe. I use a lot of different grading methods, which if you want more details on these, you can check out my eval on Cam Ward, which should be accessible with the link that should be on the screen now, as I have more details in that. Also, if you want to check out my grades and evals of the quarterbacks from last year for reference, you can check them out with the link in the description. For any new viewers, I'll be trying to cover a quarterback nearly every week leading up to the 2025 NFL Draft, and I've done Cam Ward, Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart, and Quinn Ewers so far, which you can check out on my channel. But if you don't want to miss any future quarterback evals, be sure to subscribe. Now let's take a look at Milroe. Starting with Milroe's basic stats, they were okay as a passer, but a bit underwhelming with high expectations with Kalen DeBoer bringing his system from Washington to Alabama. As a passer, Milroe ended up completing 64.3% of his passes for 2,844 yards, 16 touchdowns, and threw 11 interceptions. As a rusher, he was very active, rushing on 168 attempts and picking up 726 yards and 20 touchdowns, which we just usually don't see. Many quarterbacks for Power 4 schools have more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns nowadays, but Miller's an exception. The unfortunate thing to see, though, with his rushing stats is that he had 9 fumbles, which continue to be a problem for him. Also, for the games we'll be charting, I am selecting his games against Oklahoma, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Georgia. Maybe it's controversial, but I ended up not going with his bowl game against Michigan since there were some players that opted out for that game. I know where some players opted out on Michigan's defense, which maybe would help Milroe's case, but I just want to try to avoid bowl games when I can, since I think they're just very weird now with the expanded playoffs and so many opt-outs. Also, I honestly just really wanted to chart his Oklahoma game to see if it was as bad as the box score indicated. So anyways, let's start breaking down some of his grades. Starting with Milroe's footwork, he mechanically has a long way to go with his footwork, but he does do a decent job getting his feet and toes set when delivering quick one-read throws. He also doesn't do too much bouncing in the pocket and does a good job keeping his feet flat. Outside of that though, he will need a major overhaul in his footwork. His lower body is often not in sync with his upper body, leading to a lot of inconsistent ball placement. Also, his dropback lacks consistent rhythm, and his technique is often inconsistent with his legs crossing over each other and being very heel clicky. His footwork also deteriorates when pressure is getting close, leading to a lot of back foot throws that too often miss their mark and end up as bouncers to their pass catcher. So Milroe's footwork still very much a work in progress. He ended up earning just a D for his footwork. Moving to pocket presence, though his pocket presence is definitely another area he has to grow in, he has a good eye for passing windows and a relatively low amount of bad balls at line of scrimmage. He also isn't afraid to take a hit to deliver balls downfield, which is an issue for a lot of the other quarterbacks in this class. Also, he definitely made improvements with his internal clock as he did a better job identifying rushers closing in and getting the ball out before they got home. That being said, he's still a tick slow in recognizing that pressure getting close that is still leading to unnecessary hits and possible turnovers. When he is being proactive with the pass rush, he looks frantic and impatient and will sometimes try to force the ball to his first read, whether they're covered or not. He just doesn't make the subtle movements in the pocket or show the pocket awareness that is needed to be successful in the NFL. When he does make movements, they're usually all or nothing breaks that compromise his base and worsen his accuracy. Now, I do give him a lot of credit that he does do a good job keeping his eyes downfield, but he needs to either be willing to hit his check down or just scramble a lot more frequently, since he just doesn't have the accuracy to win through the air on busted plays right now. So again, with a lot of improvements still needed in this area as well, Milroe ended up earning just a D+ for his pocket presence. Now let's shift some gears and get to some positives for Milroe. Starting with his arm strength, which is one of the strongest arms in the class. The accuracy isn't always there, but he can absolutely fling it and get the ball downfield with excellent velocity. Milroe also has a solid release and doesn't have too much dip in his motion. There's also a bit of a trend in quarterbacks in this draft class of patting the ball before throwing it, but Milroe does a good job not keying in the defense when he's throwing the ball. Now, unfortunately, he didn't score as high as I was hoping for with his release because I actually think it plays a role in some of his accuracy issues. Miller's release point when he's throwing the ball really seems to fluctuate a lot, with it sometimes being too early and other times being too late. I think this also played a big part of why he has a lot of trouble putting touch on throws. Also, while he doesn't have too much dip in his release, he does have a bit of a tendency to pull the ball a bit too far back, which slows his process down a little bit. That being said, there's still a lot more good than bad when looking at both his arm strength and release, which ended up grading out at an A- for his arm strength and a B for his release. Now, where Milroe is undeniably an exciting player is with his playmaking ability. He has one of the best arms in the class and the best rushing upside of the quarterbacks in this class. He is also well built to be able to withstand hits and runs with good vision to help pick up yards. There are definitely deficits in his games as I previously discussed, but the mold is there for a great quarterback. If he's given a chance to develop and brought up slowly with a QB-friendly scheme, he could become a truly special playmaker for a patient team with the right development plan. What holds him back from getting higher grades in playmaking and top star potential, though, are his ball security, accuracy issues, and processing speed. Milroe ended up having 9 fumbles, and while a number were due to sacks he took while losing track of the pass rush, I also caught a number of times that he was holding the ball in his inside arm or the arm closest to the defense while he was running. That left the ball exposed and easier to force out. So I want to see him have more discipline and do a better job switching to his outside arm to at least help make a dent in that fumble total. Also, we'll see this more clearly in his charting totals, but Milroe's accuracy is really disappointing and really hasn't progressed and honestly may have regressed in some areas. Last season he was a great deep ball thrower, but he really struggled in the second half of this year with his deep ball. He also struggles in the intermediate areas of the field, which ended up making Alabama's offense very limited this year. In the short areas of the field, his ball placement is often lacking, leading to reduced opportunities for his pass catchers to pick up yards after the catch. Just as his accuracy hasn't improved, his processing still didn't make many strides this season. Every snap you can catch Milroe staring down his first read, and will often try to force it in, as I've mentioned before. When his first read is taken away and he tries to turn elsewhere, you can see the panic in his eyes at times and he can fall apart mechanically. He also struggles to read the leverage of his receivers and has difficulty knowing how to place it where only his pass catcher can make a play. He also has major deficits throwing with anticipation, as he will typically wait after his pass catcher makes his cut to release the ball. Now, if we want to be generous, he did have a new head coach, multiple new pass catchers, and a new system being implemented this season, which further impacted his processing speed. The problem is he's going to be facing that same issue when he enters the NFL, and we hope that quarterbacks with star potential can be able to overcome this in college. Unfortunately, Milroe couldn't. While it's fun to imagine what could happen if he gets some polish to his game, but when we need to polish his footwork, pocket management skills, accuracy, ball security, and processing, we're talking about a big project for a team to take on, and it's just hard to expect a team to be patient enough to see the fruition, or just honestly be hard to expect a coaching staff to be in long enough to be able to see the results. With all that in consideration, Milroe ended up grading with a B as a playmaker, which admittedly feels a bit generous with all the deficits, but his upside definitely helps. Also, Milroe had an interception or fumble on 20 of his 487 pass and rush attempts this year, which equaled out to an interception or fumble on every 24.35 pass or rush attempt, and ends up grading out to just a D+ per my scale. Which, for reference, has him tied for one of the lowest I've graded, as he's tied with Devin Leary and Jason Bean from last year, which is not a good company to be in. For his top star potential, again, I felt a bit generous here, but I did want to recognize his grades traits, and ended up grading him out at a C. So now that we're through the qualitative grades, let's see if his charting and accuracy grades help him out a little bit. I alluded to this earlier, but Milroe's charting and accuracy grades likely won't help his overall grade and his case of being a first-round quarterback like I've seen some people suggest. If you're a visual follower, you'll see a lot of red with nearly half of the areas of the field with an attempt in red, and mostly areas past the line of scrimmage in red. Starting at the top, as I mentioned, Milroe had fantastic deep ball accuracy last season, but really struggled in the second half of this year, and especially in the games I charted, which is a 50% score in the deep middle and a really disappointing 30% score in the deep right. Also, before anyone says it, while this isn't a true sample of his deep ball, we can see even the worst in deep ball accuracy in just his completion percentage, with him completing just 38.6% of his passes past 20 yards this year, compared to completing 52.2% in 2023. That's a huge drop-off and really hamstrings his upside. Moving down to his intermediate areas, Milroe had a respectable 58.33% grade in the intermediate left, but just a 45% in the intermediate right. We saw continued struggles in the medium left at 69.05% and short right at 65.79%, but he did at least have a score of 85.71% in the medium middle. Now, like I mentioned before, maybe we can make the excuse that he was working with a new group of pass catchers and being in a new offense affected those numbers, but these are still pretty poor marks and seem a bit more likely tied to his release point and footwork issues. Also, like I mentioned though in the positives of his footwork, it's good on very short passing concepts, and we saw that translate in all of his short areas being in the green, at 73.08% in the short left, 83.33% in the short middle, and 85.29% in the short right. So at the very least, he's not a completely broken quarterback like some people may paint him as this draft cycle, and he can at least hit the layups. Moving on to his off-platform accuracy, it's kind of a lot of the same we saw in his on-platform. He still mostly struggles getting the ball down the field and past the line of scrimmage, but did have a good score in the deep right at 50%. Outside of that area though, it's pretty rough at 25% in the intermediate left, 0% in the intermediate right, 50% in the medium left and right, but at least a respectable 100% in the medium middle, though that was based on just a single throw. Behind the line of scrimmage, it's still mostly good though, at 100% in the short left and 73.08% in the short right, which are both at least at the 70th percentile compared to last year's class. The short middle though was just at 25% on just 2 throws. So he definitely pumped up his final numbers thanks to the volume in the short right, but it's just, again, a bit disappointing to see Milroe not be overly effective down the field on the move, since that could really open up some big opportunities with his legs. So now moving to Milroe's game against Oklahoma, well, it was basically as bad as the stats indicated. Just a lot of red with most of the areas with targets being red and often not being close to 50th percentile. Surprisingly, this was actually one of his better games in the intermediate areas of the field, with all the places that he targeted actually being in the green, but it kind of felt like Oklahoma was willing to concede that area, with Milroe struggling in those areas typically in most of his other games. With Oklahoma focusing their efforts in the short and medium areas of the field, they were able to pick off Milroe 3 times. So I know this may not be a terribly helpful analysis, since it's just kind of me being like, yeah, it was as bad as I thought it was, and we all thought it was, and the charting kind of confirmed that it was bad, but I partly just wanted to do it just because I was truly curious how bad it was. But I also think it paints a picture of how bad things can go if a team is prepared for Milroe, and puts together a great game plan to be able to beat him, and what can happen if Milroe doesn't improve his accuracy past the line of scrimmage. For his numbers on the move against Oklahoma, there's not a whole lot to take away here. He did have a fantastic throw on the move to the deep right, but again, it was pretty limited around the line of scrimmage and just didn't have a whole lot of opportunities on the move, as they did a good job keeping him in the pocket. For Milroe's supplemental data, those accuracy charts don't look good. It actually starts to kind of look good with his left side of the field accuracy being at 68.48% and middle of the field accuracy being at 76.92%, which are both at least in the 70th percentile compared to last year's class. Unfortunately, he had more pass attempts on the right side of the field than the left and middle combined, and had really poor results there with just a score of 63.38%, which is easily in the lower percentile. That also dropped his total accuracy to 64.54%, which again, is on the low end of quarterbacks I've graded and charted this year, and all 18 I graded and charted last year. Not surprising, but Milroe also had a high number of way off target throws, with 3.5 per game for on-platform, and 1.25 per game for off-platform. Milroe also had a number of sacks with 2.5 per game, but surprisingly he had just 1 fumble in the games I charted, and ended up having his other 8 fumbles in the other games I didn't chart. As I mentioned earlier, Milroe does do a good job finding passing windows and had no passes deflected at the line of scrimmage in the games I charted. For reference, he also had 1 pass interference call per game, and Milroe didn't do a lot of it, but he did have 1 throwaway per game. Milroe did unfortunately have a lot more interceptions though, with 1.75 per game and 0.25 drop per game, so essentially making about 2 per game. Milroe also had just 2 drops per game and was pretty busy as a rusher with 11.75 designed QB runs per game and 2 scrambles per game. Honestly, I was a bit disappointed not to see him scramble more. I felt like it was something that he could have done to help a little bit of his consistency to his game and help the offense. If he had done that more, he could have maybe been better against the blitz and pressure, as both were just under the 50th percentile, with a 53.33% success rate against blitz and 49.46% against pressure. So with all that data, Milroe ended up getting an A- for his short throw accuracy, a B+ for his medium throw accuracy, but as I mentioned though, things got a lot worse the further we got from the line of scrimmage, with Milroe grading out with just a C+ for his intermediate accuracy and D+ for his deep throw accuracy, which are both easily the lowest grades in these spots of the players I graded so far this class. For his throw on the run ability, Milroe ended up grading out at a B+, but we may need to put a bit of an asterisk on that since we saw the struggles he can have throwing past the line of scrimmage. Finally, Milroe ended up grading out at a B- for his success against pressure and blitz, which is better than I expected based on how bad he was the previous seasons, but with his rushing upside is still a disappointing score. So as a summary of Milroe's strengths, he has elite arm strength and fantastic rushing upside. While there is still a lot that Milroe needs to learn, he has traits that you just can't teach to a quarterback. Also, while his release can be improved, his overall release is pretty concise and quick, which gives him some great velocity to his throws. Also, his toughness can't be denied. He consistently didn't shy away from hits and was always willing to take a big hit to deliver a ball downfield. While there are definitely limitations to his game, his tough mentality could really impress a team. Finally, it was also good to see that his internal clock improved a little bit, leading to a bit less sacks and a bit of improvement against pressure and blitz. Still a ways to go, but the improvement he showed is good to see and at least shows NFL teams that he can improve in that area. As for Milroe's areas of improvements, like I mentioned, he still has improvements that can be made as a pocket manager and navigator. He still needs to take that next step and make those small movements in the pocket instead of the all or nothing breaks that he makes now. He also needs to find a way to do a better job throwing with anticipation. That's a necessity in the NFL, and offense is likely going to need him to do well in that area if he wants to get early playing time while he works to improve his down the field issues. Also, he will need to continue to work on his footwork to help get his upper and lower body in sync to help his accuracy issues. His release point will also need some discipline, as this also affected his accuracy and impacted how well he could put touch on balls. He also absolutely needs to learn how to protect the ball better both in the air and on the ground if he wants to get playing time. Finally, it goes without saying with some of the previous points I made, but he absolutely needs to improve his ball placement and accuracy. It's not to the level of NFL starter and may barely be at backup level right now. So by taking the average of all of Milroe's grades to get an average or final overall score, he ended up with a 2.46 out of 4, which equals out to needing improvements to contribute and just barely missing out on the next level of may have a future role. My grade rewards develop players more so than players you need to believe can develop into starters, which led to Milroe ended up with such a low score. But I do believe that this is a pretty fitting area for Milroe to grade out as, since I think he has a lot of tools like his arm strength and rushing ability to give hope for a future possible role in the NFL, but his accuracy, footwork, pocket presence, and ball security are all really rough right now. Now that being said, if you have Milroe as your QB3 or even higher because of that traits, I totally get it. But at the same time, I just have a hard time seeing a team look at Milroe and confidently think, yeah, we can fix that. I think he could be a fun project for a team, but I don't see a team believing he could be their starting quarterback in the next 2 years. I think it's more likely that he ends up going on day 3 than it is that he goes on day 1. As for a comp, it feels mean to say, but I originally had Justin Fields as a comp for Milroe, but it just feels a bit too high right now. Due to this, I have Malik Willis as a fair comp for Milroe. Both can hit the underneath routes with decent accuracy and have a great arm to complete deep balls. However, both suffer from serious deficiencies in footwork, pocket presence, throwing with anticipation, and ability to read a defense. Willis was essentially given a second chance being able to escape the Titans and go to a more QB-friendly system in Green Bay, and has developed into a competent backup who can keep a team in the game when he's not asked to do too much. That might be the best outlook for Milroe early in his career until he makes those advancements in the pocket and mechanically. And that's all for Jalen Milroe. Let me know what your thoughts are on the eval and on Milroe, since I'd be really curious to see what your thoughts are on him, since I think his upside is definitely undeniable. I plan to have my Will Howard video out next week, and I'll be working to have a quarterback eval most of the weeks leading up to the draft, so to be sure you don't miss out on any of them, be sure to subscribe. While you're at it, like the video as it would help the channel and the series grow thanks to you. And if you want just a written form of the eval, you can subscribe to my Substack, as I'll have the full written eval for each player out at the same time in the video. Also, just a heads up, but I'm really happy to announce that I was offered the opportunity to be a contributor for Dynasty League Football. It's a huge honor to be given the chance to be part of that team, and I'm looking forward to working with them. So if you use this site or want to use that site now, you might see some of my work there soon. But I also want to bring that up just to give the clarification that with me now being a contributor, it won't impact this channel or uploads at all. I'll also be continuing my usual series, and my rankings and contributions to DLF will be more extra bonus stuff I get to work on with them. So rest assured, not going anywhere here. But with all that out of the way with, thank you all and see you all next time.